And I don't mean, I mean that literally, but also I mean it figuratively. If the races represent darkness and our creating our own God, and what made me think about it was when we began to talk, or when Nick made a statement once about out of Europe comes no religion, but it began to manipulate other religions. And I believe that served a purpose for the merging of all of the quote-unquote religious concepts, so that we can really squeeze the darkness out of it and begin to manifest the light in a more effective manner. And that's reflective in interracial relationships. I think it's reflected in interracial relationships. And I think that we look at interracial relationship and racism from a perspective of harshness and meanness and something that we need to be always aware of. But I think it's a deeper meaning to that. And the deeper meaning, I think, is us coming to the realization that there are no separation in terms of races. There are only separation in terms of concepts. And those concepts are being merged and manifested in a racial manner by racial relationships. And it's no accident that the hotbed of racism is the place where you see the most interracial offsprings in the Deep South. So, from that, give me some feedback. Call me crazy, or help me lay it out.
Well, what is the most concrete, materialistic way that we see the separation of people? And the most obvious one is by the way someone's outward appearance.
Right.
So it is hard to get beyond the appearance to look at the heart from the materialistic, concrete world. So, I mean, if you broke that down, people would probably perceive hearts a lot clearer sooner.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. Let me tell you why. Because it's very difficult for someone to hate their grandchild. You know, so hearts are being changed, softened. The stony hearts are being made into fleshy hearts, you know, that kind of thing. So the outward appearance is going to have less meaning than ever before as a result of the merging of the races.
Yep, I agree. And you can definitely see it even here in DC, where the inequality in terms of how we are kept separate is visibly greater than many of the places I've been. But yeah, I've seen more interracial couples here than I've seen anywhere.
And that's ironic because we're talking about generational stuff, right? When I was there, that was unheard of. And it was not so much because of Caucasian, but it was because of African Americans said, no, we're not going to dilute our race. And that was the attitude. And on the fringes of the city were Caucasians. But everything in Central City was African Americans. Now, you were there and you're beginning to see that on the fringes are African Americans, but in the center are Caucasian, and all this stuff is, all of them being mixed now. So it's an inner mixture of races now. While on the fringes, like in Acacia, they're trying to push people out in that direction, African Americans, or push them into Maryland. But I think that in itself is a type of squeezing that I was talking about. Bringing the light, making the light more apparent, but not necessarily people being more aware of what they're seeing. And I believe that when we began to talk about it and we began to act on it, then what we began to do is remove the blinders from those who cannot see beyond what they've seen all their lives.
Or something happens that forces it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they come in without kicking the screen.
Right. Not at all.
It may be that somebody's child ends up, or somebody's grandchild ends up being uncovered as that biracial child that they didn't know about, or it doesn't mean it'll be easy.
Well, I think it's also apparent in what happened during the course of the week. You know, people look at Ted Cruz and they don't see the spiritual significance of that. You know, when you look at him and what he represents and who he represents, and all of a sudden the silence is being broken. And the very people who are going along to get along because they're afraid of being primary, they're not afraid anymore. What happened so quickly? You know, what changed that? Why is it now that there is such chaos in the midst of that group of people who was fighting to keep the status quo and was fighting to make sure that when the nation becomes brown, that the brown would not have any power by virtue of changing electoral votes, by virtue of gerrymandering districts. All of that now, there's an upheaval in that. And there's a deeper spiritual meaning to that than what we see. Because I'm one of those people who believe that every single event in this life is a spiritual event. It's a manifestation of something that's taking place in the other realm. I just believe that, and I think that all the little entertainment factors are spiritual events to keep people confused or to keep them distracted from what's real. So that in itself is spiritual also.
And that's
it's very interesting in what you're talking about, because just this past week, in regards to racism and skin tone, etc., from both the two other cultures. I have a Guyanese friend who is half Guyanese and half black, and was talking about how divisive it was in Guyana with the blacks and the Indians, and the British pretty much doing that to them, making them hate one another. And then I met someone else who's Dominican, and both of them were pretty much just discussing how they discovered that the entire idea of light skin and dark skin, like they did not know that was with African Americans as well, because it was in those places also. So I find it very interesting that we're talking about that this morning.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. So now I haven't said anything yet because I'm just putting all of that together. Go ahead. What are you about to say?
I've been drawn to study more deeply Native Americans, and I've been reading this book about this Sioux medicine man, and he's doing the same thing. You can take the Native American, as he makes reference to himself as Indian, you can take those words out and put African in there, and it would be exactly the same thing, that the way they were treated and the way they treat themselves by virtue of division. And see, this is the thing that I think most people forget or don't even know, that was it I think it was the Niagara Convention, where the Europeans began to divide Africa into nations and the rest of the world. And what they did, they drew them across tribal lines on purpose so they could have them fighting each other constantly.
Those were not natural countries or divisions that they drew. Yes.
That's right, absolutely. And they did that on purpose. And they divided up Africa, the Portuguese, the Germans, and the British. They divided the continent up, and they divided it up in such a manner that they could perpetuate colonialism even if they were not there, because the people themselves did it. And you can see the remnants of that if you go into the Caribbean, especially Caribbean courts. The way the policemen are is no different than the way they are in Britain. I think this also is a spiritual reality that had to take place because without hardship or struggle, there is no search for light. So the very thing that they did to destroy is the thing that's beginning to bring things full circle.
Yeah, because it seems like this is indicative of an awakening of people realizing, like, hold up, you know, all of a sudden, like a light bulb just going off, like, this is not right, this is not natural, like, what have we been doing all this time? And recognizing it, you know, all over many different levels.
Nikki has a question, but let me insert this. Don't forget that the last time we came together, the last time we came together as facilitators or teachers, it was to deal with racism. And we've seen a huge swing since we came together in terms of what's being represented. Thank you.
My question is, were the Europeans intentionally doing this, or was it the energy of the people that it ultimately happened to that gave the Europeans the power to actually do it? And when I say that is now the shift is taking place because there's more energy focusing on the change. So it has to take place. So is it ultimately our own energy that allows something negative to even enter into our space, the collective
Absolutely.
energy?
It is, but at the same time, keep in mind that people of color, whether it be Native American, African, or whatever, are the most forgiving people on earth. I mean, let me tell you something. If I were a Japanese after Nagasaki and Hiroshima, a European could not come to my country, period. You know, if you think about it from a material perspective, after what they did, and when you think about what happened with us being brought here, those kinds of things, I do believe that that there is that there is a significance in that. We're the ones who messed it up in terms of our attitudes. And I say we, I'm talking about from the Caucasian all the way back to the African, everything in between. So where it started in terms of messing up, that's where it starts to bring it back together. And if it were not for forgiveness, this would be a totally divided world. Think about it. If every, I'm not talking about individual forgiveness, I'm talking about cultural forgiveness. If it were not for cultural forgiveness, this would be a huge mess in terms of divisions.
And I just want to add to the when you said if it was something that our energy didn't allow this to take place, it kind of was, because the Europeans and the people who came out of Europe, when they spread across the country, they actually provided the catalyst for the changes that are happening, or the recognition that is happening now. But the thing is, the opportunity to recognize who and what we are was available at every point throughout all of history. So what I mean to say is that it didn't necessarily have to be as bad as it was, or is. But because it's been as bad as it was, when we flip that on its head, the inverse of that is going to be as good as it will be in order to balance that out. So in other words, in case that was confusing at all, the degree to which negativity has been spread around the world is the degree to which it will snap back into positivity in terms of our relationships with ourselves and with each other on a spiritual level.
I think that last week when you talked about pole shift, and that we are actually talking about a spiritual event that has taken place. I think that was the first step along this journey of what we are speaking of right now. There was opportunity, as you said, at different points in history. And if you look at the different points in history, you will see that when those opportunities were not taken, things got worse. From the point of view of the natural, things got worse. And there were greater divisions brought to bear. And it's almost like, okay, you didn't see it, so things got to get worse for you to see it. You see what I'm talking about? So things got worse every time the mankind missed an opportunity. And for some reason, I believe wholeheartedly that prior to now, in terms of other opportunities, we are at a point where we are taking the opportunity far beyond what others have done, because of our accepting that there are many roads to the Creator. When people have taken opportunity in the past, it's been separation, Muslim, Buddhists, Christians, etc. But now there is a group of people who say that all of those isms are legitimate. But if you look at history, there was no group who said that. Somebody was always excluded, is what I'm saying. And they were excluded just like race was excluded. But now there are no exclusions. But I'm talking about within this group, of course. Everything is inclusive, and it does not surprise me that at the onset there was such an effort to make sure that the group was not successful in terms of the studies, the direction, the understandings, the desires. There were all kinds of incidents that took place along the way. But now it seems as though things are beginning to gel, and there is a sense of unicity throughout the group, where now those things that would normally shake us doesn't shake anymore. It's expected. And when it's expected, it's accepted, and then we move on. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you use the word gel. Gel is like something beginning to have definition or being seen in the physical.
Yeah.
It's like spiritual things that have been going on, and you're finally seeing some shape take place in the physical. So
Okay, yeah.
that's what all part of this is about.
And I'll be right back.
Okay. We'll see you in a minute.
He's going to save somebody. I mean, he's going to put on his
Yeah.
costume.
He stepped into the phone booth.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah, but we anyway, I believe that if we say that as a man thinketh, so is he, right? If we believe that, and I really know that we do believe that, then if we are not the tip of the spear, why do we think it?
In the first place.
Yeah, why would we think that if we were not it? And when we look at, and when I say it, whatever the it is, and when we look at the diversity in terms of personalities and attitudes, there is no rational, or shall I say logical reason why it's possible to jail when you look at the diversity involved. So when I say that, I'm actually saying that, and I'm taking a leap here, maybe, I don't know, that if we don't make definite steps towards shaping whatever this it is, and we're going to miss the opportunity that everyone else has missed, and things are going to get progressively worse. And when I say shaping, I'm not talking about shaping in terms of saying, okay, this is what we're doing, but I'm talking about shaping by virtue of being open to the Creator to guide us wherever we need to be. That's what I'm talking about. And I think that the opportunities that are presenting themselves are opportunities that represent the mallet and the chisel in the hands of the sculptor, with the Creator being the sculptor and us being the granite. And however we are shaped or moved, that's what we do. And I'm probably the singlest person in here who's in contact with most of the people in both places. And when I'm talking to the people in both places, not only do I hear them dealing with same things, but how they approach it is the same, and the things that they are seeking are the same. The things that they are walking away from are the same. So I'm beginning to see this. That tells me that the energy is beginning to come together or intermingle, or maybe I should say, if we see it from the perspective of a brain, that all the thoughts, every individual represents a thought in that mind, and all of them are beginning to recognize that even though I'm a different thought, I am the same thought.
So becoming more of a collective thought of one.
Yeah, that's it, the collective, the Borg. Yeah. Yeah, a collective.
So we're synapses.
I am one of 7. Yeah.
Billion.
Zeros don't count.
But that's how I see it.
Yep. And it's happening from the inside out as well. So it's just like you said, people are realizing that they need to change something about the way we interact with each other without necessarily being able to describe the how and the why, which is kind of how we are meant to do it as well. We don't really have to worry about thinking about it too much. We just have to recognize what it is that our ego is attempting to push the influence of our spirit out and get what it wants, and just not let that happen.
Yeah, it seems like once you get the ego out of the way and you just be, you return to a natural state of equilibrium, which I think is what is actually taking place.
Well,
Go ahead.
And I think the distractions are being, a lot of distractions being removed more quickly, and they're not being removed because we move them. They're being removed because we recognize them and decide that it will no longer be a distraction. So they move.
Yeah, and that's letting go of the ego, letting go of the ideas.
Because when you struggle with something, what? You have to hold on to it to struggle with it.
Yeah, you're in a force, like a struggle with it, yes.
So, but when you let it go, you're no longer struggling.
Which is funny because that thing cannot struggle or provide a force against you unless you try to push it.
Yeah.
And the key thing too is, we said, how do we get stronger? By exercising, and when we give that force more resistance by pushing against it, we make it stronger in a sense, rather than just letting it go and what's it gonna resist then? It just dies.
Well,
Or goes somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you just said, this is, it's a classic Western idea of fitness, for example, right? To go out and pump iron and jog marathons. But if you can try to understand and learn from maybe what other cultures, Chinese, etc., they have a whole different approach, and yet their level of fitness can be, they're not muscular, but that's not the same thing. We all know you can be big and muscular and not be fit at all,
Yeah.
really. In fact, you've got to really maintain it's more difficult, I think. But, sure, so that's just been our definition of it, and yet there are other more subtle ways to be fit, and I think particularly our population will learn that the more they age. Right now, you have a culture that says, try to keep up, so, do all, but slowly but surely, I think some of those other quote-unquote softer, that we'll learn more that what kind of strength there is in a softness, you know what I mean? Softness is not giving in, it's just something different, so. The only phrase I've never been really comfortable with in here, and maybe it reveals my own struggle with my ego, and everybody here knows I got one, is the tip of the spear. I don't quite know, I'm not comfortable with that phrase, but that's me. And for me, so I sort of discount it, because if it's all about your intent and your connection, there's no need to characterize something as a tip, a vanguard, because then you have other phrases to me that come with it, leading others, you know what I mean? And then if your ego jumps in there, it's going to want to take control, it's going to organize, blah, 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 instead of just, you are what you are, you're on the path you're on, and
The whole idea of the tip of the spear became a part of my vernacular when the book came out, Pierced in the Darkness, that series of books, and it was actually creating darkness, and in order for the darkness to be pierced so that light can penetrate, it takes a sharp point, and it's simply a way of a metaphor, more or less, for the whole concept of doing whatever is necessary to allow light to flow without trying to shape it. So that's where that comes from. But well, go ahead, Nick, because I'm going in a different direction.
Well, the flip side of that is where I was at one point in time, is that we fall into that's how it's always been, I'm not there yet, I'm still working on me attitude. And that's the attitude that I struggled with, because it felt like if we're always trying to get there, at what point do we have confidence to know that we are, as you would say, I know that I know that I know. And so I got lost in seeing those things, or I have a different concept of how do I show my boys love if I always say boys are supposed to wrestle going up, because I've always seen it go awry. I've always seen plain rough housing go awry. And so I'm at that point in life where I have everyone say, oh, they're just boys. And I'm like, no, I'm tired of living in that's just the way it's supposed to be. So I want to believe that I am the beginning of that change, that's not how it's going to be. And so that's why you can go to the other extreme of being the tip of the spear. So I want to find that balance where I understand that, yes, I'm doing this for the greater good. It's not just for myself. I'm making these changes because they will, in fact, affect the rest of the world. Even if the rest of the world does not recognize it, the purpose for which it's being done through me is for the greater good of the whole.
And if you always talk about, I'm not there yet, you never get there.
That's
You have
how
to
I
believe
feel.
that
It's
you
like
are.
we got to
Yeah, I
cut
mean,
that
whatever-
language out.
well,
You don't have to know where there is.
Right.
what there are you talking about?
Yeah,
Right,
it
well,
doesn't
see,
matter.
that's the purpose
doesn't
of the
matter.
journey.
If that thing
Is
makes
to
any
move.
sense, it's a path.
Yeah,
But it doesn't make sense. It's not going to make sense in our
no,
physical
when I'm
mind.
talking about
Right.
wherever there
It's not
is,
supposed to make
no,
sense.
it's not logical.
No.
And
No,
that's
okay,
the-
that's truthful, and there's not even a journey, really. You are where you are. There is a journey. You want some sense of movement and change.
But it doesn't necessarily happen.
But you're not going from
in
point A to
or-
point B. Now we're back to the, hey, you didn't make it to point B in your lifetime, so you're only a C+ person kind of thing. It's not
So-
like
Let's
that.
clarify before we go any further what it is you pointed to
It's the box in the corner.
that says,
That's the whole board to me, what it boils down to. Set the direction of your intent. It's all about intent, right?
And therefore,
And that's new, that can be new to you, so you don't know what that's gonna mean. You just constantly absorbing what that intention seems to bring and put you in front of, etc. And then you find out, whoops, or whatever.
and that's why it's not going from point A to point B. There are no points. That's why we deal with the conception. When we were at the church, there were points. And it was represented by the control you had, or how many times you were recognized, the work that you did in terms of visible work. There were points, but I don't think there are points. We don't see points. We deal with concepts. And when Richard was talking about the fitness question, the whole idea of muscular representing fitness fits into the egotistical society by virtue of fitness is defined by what you can see, as opposed to what you really are.
well, it's becoming fashionable in some fitness circles to define fitness by what you are fit for.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to pick a goal, like I want to be able to grab both of my children and pull them out of a burning house without being out of breath.
Yeah.
And then these people will find sacks of flour or whatever and run around with them to be sure that they are fit for that purpose. I'm serious, they literally do. And so I think that's kind of interesting that there's kind of this thought, you know, that people want to be prepared for a certain eventuality, and that is how they define their fitness.
What do you do if you pick up 2 sacks of flour and freeze from
Wow.
fear? I mean, anyway, I'm just saying. Yeah, no, I guess I understand what you're saying. I sort
Ways
of
to be
felt like
prepared.
that when suddenly yoga became hot yoga and everything. It's like, golly, we can't leave anything alone. You know? We gotta rev it up, and if you're not sweating hard,
And ready to
Twist
puke,
it around.
yeah.
and then, and I know, and we all know that half of that stuff you're doing is some 35-year-old guy's idea of what you should be doing because he's a physical nut. And 9 times out of 10, it's nutrition and lifestyle stuff. It's not all that.
And
That's the softer understanding, and you have to be quiet and listen to, you know.
and again, when you look at that from a physical perspective, it is all about what you see. It's a visual, and also the whole idea of intellect is audio. What you hear someone else, how they express themselves, and you know how well read they are, how articulate they are. You know, I mean that's again one of those natural things, and I firmly believe that intellect, the fitness, visual fitness, these are also distractions. There is no true logic when you start dealing with the esoteric. It's just not logical for things to exist the way they do and things to manifest the way they do. There's no logic to that. What do you find the logic with a group of people meeting in a room, determining that we need to bring weather back into balance, and the next month it happens? You see, or 2 people deciding that they're going to hold a bus or plane, whichever one that Sheldon and Jennings did. Two people deciding. Where's the logic in that? You see where I'm coming from? There's just no logic there. So you cannot process that from an intellectual perspective. That's what I'm saying. It's something that I don't even know whether you can use the term that you feel. I don't know how to express it. But I do know that it does exist by virtue of constantly experiencing it. And again, the it is not defined, because I don't know what the it is unless someone else does. I don't. Because what was the it that made that happen?
I mean, I can't help but think that logic and intellect are part of a framework that fits the false, physical, natural reality that we can kind of see and touch. And it has nothing to do with, for lack of a better phrase, the spiritual realm, or the roots of who we are.
By virtue of your very logic or definition, you can find and define a thing.
Yes.
And it's more than what your limited, rational, logical mind can conceive.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that, did I tell you about the story where the Native American was fishing? He and his grandson were fishing, and they looked up and saw a fox. And the fox went into its den and took a cub out and took it to higher ground and came back to the other one, and the grandfather and the fox eyes locked. And the grandfather said something in the native language, and the fox howled 4 times. And the grandfather says to the grandson, let's go. We got to get out of here right now. Pack up everything. Let's go. Rushing him, got back to where they were living and said to everyone, board up the windows, get a supply of food at least for a week, and move all the machinery and the animals into a safe place. Neighbors did not pay him any attention, and what happened is the river flooded like it had never flooded before, and there was a howling wind that blew things all around for almost a week. There's a tremendous storm that they had never experienced before. And it's attributed to, and they asked the grandfather, how did you know it? He said, the fox told me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no logic there. There's no logic at all there.
There was a movie.
You see where I'm coming from?
Let me see that. There was a movie similar to that. Some guy out west who insisted on building a better tornado shelter. And he just said he had this overwhelming feeling something bad, really bad was coming. And he built it and spent a lot of money on it, and his wife was all upset because they didn't have a lot of money and blah, 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 and nothing happened. They had a storm, but it was nothing. So now he became ridiculed by people instead of being a prophet of, And then they take a trip back to the East Coast, and I think he went to New Jersey or something, and at the end of the movie, they're standing out on the balcony, and here come the storm clouds from that storm. I think it's based on a real story.
And
Built the shelter in the wrong place?
His
I know that's not what I was supposed to
I'm
take away
reading
from
some of
that.
the- I'm
But
reading some of the- I'm reading a book on how we make decisions, which I think is
Okay.
it's laborious. It doesn't need to be written this way, but the chapter I'm on now has to do with intuition. But the intuition has something, it isn't just your understanding of what it's telling you. The feeling is based on your experience and other awareness that you have. The alert is there.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a complete enough understanding to know what his intuition, if you want, was telling him.
Okay.
And I think
But her point is, after he did all of that, the shelter was back somewhere else, and he was in New Jersey where the storm was coming.
Right.
So he wasn't in the safety of the shelter that he built.
No,
the
but he was right. So
he doesn't know
He was
what's
dead
coming.
right,
Yeah.
probably.
dead right.
But the whole idea of intuition
Terrible.
is actually our recognition of and connection with everything that is. The thing that we call intuition
Yeah.
I was standing in Barnes & Noble's reading, I think I talked about this and read some things that some of the Native American women said, and it brought back memories because they were exact same things that my grandmother used to say from the Native American sayings, and we all, we grew up thinking it was weird, but all of it made sense. The idea of her knowing when somebody transitioned in the community, she always knew. That in itself spoke to what we call intuition, or her being in the other realm while being in this realm. There was nothing to her to do that. And the lady who, a Martha, the one that my grandmama's brother-in-law married, when she appeared at my grandmother's window and she said that she's gone, go down and take care of Benny. I believe that she left that body and came to let her know that she was gone and that her husband needed to be consoled. I believe that, and more as I delve into the culture and the Native American culture, I began to see more clearly how the whole of not humanity, but how the spiritual whole is simply just one entity, without a seam in anywhere, because the same things that were dealt with in this land, or the things that were dealt with in other lands, with other people who were close to the land, who were close to nature, who were one with nature. And we began to lose it when we began to depend on what he calls the green frog skin for our lives. Because he said the first time he saw money, he knew what it was. And he looked, and the man pulled out a wad of money, and he thought he had been skinning frogs and putting them in his pocket. It was really funny.
That's just as good a description as any. Green
But I
frog
think,
skins.
but I think if I can connect the two things said, this guy had, for want of a better vocabulary, an intuitive sense of something, but he didn't know how to interpret it.
Yeah.
So let me jump in on that. When you mentioned that the sort of overwhelming feeling that he got, that is exactly what happens when, well, in that particular instance, it was enough of a life-changing event so that that old man's connection to his own spirit, you could say, pushed into his normal awareness because of the urgency of the thing. But when you relax the hold of your ego and your intellect, those sorts of feelings become constant. So when you're in a space where you're receptive to them, they're not overwhelming in the sense that they sort of push out of your mind whatever else you were thinking about. They are what you use to think and make decisions with normally.
Yeah,
And
but
it takes a lot of practice to be there.
it's the last part you just said. And I wouldn't even use the word practice. It takes a comfort because of a familiarity with that kind of connection. Obviously, he didn't have it, so it was sort of overwhelming. He interpreted it, and then he held on to his interpretation. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Instead of letting
So
it be
there's-
fluid. So it overwhelmed him, and but it was wrong, but on the other hand, it was right. So,
Right. So there's two parts to it. One, you have to learn how to relax so you can become aware of the influence of your own higher self, which is spirit. Two, when the influence is present, you have to learn not to attempt to put the intellect back on it, which is what distorts what it is actually saying.
But also three, Nick, you can allow your wife to be a distraction by virtue of saying you're crazy, you're wasting about money. So that was in the back of his head also, that he was doing something stupid.
well,
Right.
it didn't stop him.
It didn't stop it, but
It was
still,
that-
it was there. You know,
Well, we've said this years ago in here. I mean, what came back to mind is we talked about people have an epiphany, a spiritual, whatever, for want of a better term. And so instead of just dropping into a meditative pose, so to speak, and what do I want to say, absorbing that and being quiet and patient in that, they go out and form a church. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, I got it!
Yeah.
Right? And so now we got to advertise it, bring everybody in, blah, blah, blah. When, just like him, you haven't got it. You've maybe been exposed or participated or whatever the word is, been connected, but we're still in that mindset of interpret it, characterize it, intellectualize it. We don't have the confidence or wisdom or experience to just be quiet
you
and let
know,
it do its work, so to speak.
you know,
That has to be learned.
foundation kind of came from the idea that we need to form a church. But at the same time, recognizing that it was more than that. And because at the onset, I can remember clearly when there were people who were strongly encouraging me to advertise, radio, let people know you're here, they will come. And my response to that was, no, I don't feel that. That is not what's supposed to happen. Well, what's supposed to happen, I have no idea. But that's not it. So, and of course, someone thought I was crazy. But I do believe that if I had an idea of what was going to happen, at that point, had I seen the end product, it would have scared the heck out of me. By virtue of the journey we've traveled and our understanding, there's no way I could have accepted it at that point. So, by virtue of just sitting there, being still, and no matter what anyone says, if I don't feel it, I'm not going to do it. And that was the concept that brought all this into being, and I think that was not developed by spiritual consciousness. I want you to understand, it was not. It was simply came into play as a result of probably stubbornness. You know, you're not going to tell me what to do. I have to feel it. And as a result of feeling it, sensing it, you see, the distractions were repelled as opposed to being embraced. Because the easy, logical thing to do was to advertise.
But I think in the beginning of a lot of change, you may not know much more than what you don't want.
Yeah.
And the question is whether you have faith, you have a certain trust to step out into that. We don't want this anymore. We're overwhelmed by structure. We're overwhelmed by phrases and all that kind of stuff to the point where there's no substance. So if you're trying to do something
Different.
new or more truthful, let's say more truthful,
Yeah.
it's going to reveal to some extent. And even if you could, I would say, even if you were able to know to see the vision of where it was going to go, you may be in like a grandparent mode where you can only give the child so much, or the child won't take the journey to get to where you know he could go.
And I actually, Richard, felt that, and still do at times, that there's no coincidence, that I'm no accident that was called foundation, because that's all I'm supposed to do. And someone else is to structure it. No, I don't mean structure in terms of heart. I'm talking about structure in terms of allowing it to flow the way it does with fresh eyes, with fresh desire, that kind of thing. I remember very vividly the day I walked into the Great in Faith Church and said, you know what? God told me that we got to stop. We got to end all the choirs. No singing. Can you imagine that? What happened?
So you Great in New Faith had a choir?
Oh yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah, some of the best voices in Garrison. And all of a sudden, no singing. Now, I didn't do that at Mount Carmel because I didn't feel it, but I did tell them what had transpired there. And no one challenged that. No one challenged that. And then later on, someone else came in and began to challenge it. And I began to see that that was a distraction. But seeing it retrospectively, that was telling me that this core group were the ones who were given to me, and I use that very loosely, given to me to pressure me enough to see what I needed to see. And when you take the music out of the Baptist church, that's worse than taking pastor's anniversary out.
There's only one thing left. The big hats and the clothes.
So, but when you take it out, you understand what I'm saying? That was a major step. And the next thing I knew after that, here I am in Columbia, and the first words out of my mouth when we moved into the other building were, I see the reason. This is the capital. This is where everything started in this nation that's dark. How we changed this, I don't know. But I knew that. I really knew that from the beginning. But I didn't know how to bring it into being. So I say all of that to say, not the next move, because I don't want to say step, because I don't, that's crazy. Everything is done step one, step two. But I believe that the next move is going to be so overwhelming until it's going to cause even us to question. It's going to cause, because right now we talk about, you know, like Barb said a minute ago, I said, you ready? She said, I got one verse. No, I only have one verse. I'm like, do you know where you are? One verse lasts a year. You know, but I think that we have not begun to see, or we've not experienced in any form a major change or a major move. Everything we've done is just preparation for that to take place. So, regardless of how uncomfortable it is or appears to be, regardless of how it challenges everything that we thought we knew or believed, we're going to have to be still and let it be what it is, as opposed to allowing it to become a distraction. I'm done.
And the reminder I have is from the Zohar, which says that unless we are able to see the big picture, to see the end in the beginning, as the Creator does, it can appear to us that the evil in the world is overwhelming relative to the good. But even in spite of that, the Zohar reminds us we've got to see beyond the quote-unquote apparent dangers of what things look like in the moment. And in that, when what you say begins to occur, we have to not doubt. We have to continue to exercise certainty that, you know, the Creator has our back, in a sense. That not doubt. Once we doubt, then that's a crack.
Yeah.
That sets the course of things opposite of what we want. So it's our opportunity, I think, to exercise, for lack of a better word, certainty, in knowing that we know that we know.
Right. You know, you read that from the Zohar. That's exactly what we discussed last week at Great Faith from the 73rd Psalm. That fret not, because when you...
If evildoers.
If evildoers, yeah. This exact same concept we discussed last week, which reinforces what I was trying to say earlier about the unicity of thought. Just, that's where we are. And we are there for a reason. The Creator does nothing without purpose. And what that purpose is for us being at this point, pretty much saying the same things, almost in the same words, I have no idea yet. But I do know that it's apparent to me that we have to come together soon.
But we do know what the purpose is.
Talk to me.
The purpose is to do what we're doing now, to put in the macro that regardless of what happens, there's a greater picture out there, and that we can't be distracted. We said last time, stay the course, whatever that course, stay the course meaning keep the connection with the Creator, and distractions take our eyes off that focus sometimes if we allow it to. And so that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. We don't need to try to define what that means or anything else.
Yeah, because the only thing, well, what I've been thinking since you said that is from an intellectual point, essentially what it's saying is it is impossible and it's completely impossible to judge any situation unless you know all the information when in regards to it talking about the greater picture. And just staying the course is actually deciding, okay, I don't know what the bigger picture is, so in my head, whatever is going on, no matter what the situation, is actually good. That is having faith in the Creator and trusting, just saying, okay, whatever this is good. I don't know what the purpose of it is. Maybe like, for example, you're running late. Okay, maybe it's purposeful for me to be on this train because someone else just needs my presence. I don't know. I'm not going to interview and have a survey with everyone on the train. How did you feel 5 minutes before you got on the train? How do you feel now? Like, you don't know the impact that you have, so you just go with the flow and trust that.
I'm surprised you went through the survey.
But
Where's my words?
But
and
Sheldon,
mysterious ways?
that's the paradox, though, isn't it? Because that means you have to find in yourself the truthfulness of your having that seed of understanding. You can't impose it on yourself, and you don't know that until you're standing on the edge of the cliff or some moment where everything comes at you probably too fast, and you find out. So, I mean, that's why you can imagine what was going through my mind was sort of early Christians suddenly thrown in the pit with the lions, and you probably heard a lot of prayer going on at a higher and a higher pitch. What was that? That was people trying to quiet their doubt. And I don't say that judgmentally, I just say that revealed maybe, and then there may have been quiet ones. Then that difference is, you don't know, how do you know you have at least, well, that's the work, to have that seed, if that's the word to use.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say?
How
I
do you know
don't
that
know
you
how
have
to
it?
say it.
Yeah.
Huh?
How do you know that you have it? Is that the question?
Well, you can say whatever you want
I know what
to
you're
say.
saying.
No,
You
I'm
can say-
trying.
No, I mean, you can say
I'm trying
steal the
to-
course, you don't want to be distracted, but until you're face to face
With a distraction.
with what the huge distraction is.
Yeah,
You know, like the train, you're 2 inches from the front of the train, that's the moment, that's the only moment you know. So how do you connect to that seed? I mean, this is what you read when you read about Buddhist monks, when you read about Zen. It's why a monk organizes his things every night before he goes to bed. And if he passes away, he goes, nothing's changed, doesn't matter. But he or she says that from a knowledge, not a practiced. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, what is practice is maintaining that state of being able to know that. And when a monk does it, that's an accelerated form of, and not necessarily accelerated, but it's the same thing that you will do if you just go through, if you just live life, period. Because life itself is an initiation into a higher state of awareness. The higher state of awareness is that state of awareness wherein you know that you know that you know. That's what you default to because you have built it up so much in your subconscious that it creates momentum. But you have to recognize those small moments leading up to whatever those big moments are.
Yeah.
If you are so fortunate enough as to have many small moments before a big moment. But the truth is, whether or not you do or you don't, that was set before you became physical anyway. So it doesn't matter. The ability to respond in the correct way is always there. And if you're worried about a distraction, just know that the actual distraction is the worry itself.
Right, that's it.
And we
So-
wouldn't, go ahead.
I used to, and I think I used this example before, when I first started teaching, or I used to be worried about, what I was supposed to say, or what I was gonna say. And I had to deal with that as I kept going. And everybody who teaches what we teach, or whatever you teach, has to do that.
Yeah.
Even though you don't know, don't worry. And in the space that you create when you don't worry, what you need to know will be present. But you can't know that unless you first deal with the worry.
I think that you deal with the worry only when you can stop listening to the noise so you can hear. I believe that religion has so much noise because it's afraid of hearing. It doesn't want to hear what is really being said because it doesn't make sense and they don't know what to do with it.
They can't make any money off of it.
Well,
No,
no, you're right.
Yeah,
You're
so
right.
let
You're
me
right.
give one more example.
It's the most revolutionary thing there is, which means every soul for itself, so to speak. There's no control structure, all that stuff necessary.
Well, there is a structure, but it's a natural one in the sense that it is reflective and mirroring of the natural structure that's present in reality, as opposed to a
Right. Okay.
human created one, which is based in intellect.
Touche.
It's organic. Like, you recognize a leader because of their leadership, not because someone said they were a leader, right? So you recognize someone who's a teacher because what comes out of their mouth, you know you need to listen to, even if you don't know why exactly. It's organic. But what I was going to say was, when I was first back in middle school, when I was still figuring all this out, I didn't know what about anything, but I knew there was something, and I refused to give in to the distraction of whatever it was that would have kept me from remembering that there was something else other than all the stuff I was being presented with. So even though I didn't know,
middle school.
that was before that as well.
Don't know nothing. But
So-
hopefully know there is
But-
something.
What I did was, even without knowing what I was doing, I set the direction of my intent and then just speak, which means I kept all the distraction out. I didn't know, fine, but I will, because I know there is something.
So my thought that I'm feeling is like fear. Like when something comes over me and my heart starts racing and I'm in a state of fear, it's like you can choose to focus on the fear or you can focus on something greater than that. And so I start telling myself, Christ is always with me. You promise to be with me no matter what. You have not given me the spirit of fear. And it's almost like I start to feel my heart stop, but I feel like if I focus more on that fear, it would ultimately consume me.
It would.
So it's like until I get to the point where that fear that my heart doesn't start racing, I at least have to replace the thought of the fear or what's causing the fear with some higher thought, some greater purpose for which this is even happening to me. But I do believe that there will come a point when whatever it was won't even startle me. It won't move me whatsoever. But until then, I have to take my thought off of what it is that's causing the fear and put it on something greater than
Right.
that itself.
And that's why that's the same thing as needing to sit in a meditative position and meditate. That's the training period before mastery comes. When mastery occurs, you don't need to think about other stuff. You don't need to sit down and meditate because you are the thing that you've been trying to become.
That's the whole idea communion too. You know, physical bread and wine. You get to a point where the actual the physical is not necessary. Because the whole concept of it is in remembrance of. You know, and when you recognize that you are the very thing that you were told to remember, then it is no longer necessary to do that. Just like the idea when we were at a state where we were, you know, you pray in the morning, you pray at night before you go to bed because you're going to die and you want to go to hell.
Wow.
When you get to the point where you understand that that's not necessary, because that concept is not even real anyway, and so it's not necessary because you become, every day of your life, you become what prayer really is, seeking opportunities to be balanced, to be in rhythm with the Creator.
And all of that also applies to what Nick and Richard were talking about a little while ago when Richard was talking about the guy with the tornado shelter, and he had this like huge overwhelming feeling. Well, once he becomes more and more receptive to that, then he will be able to live his life like that perpetually, just because every day small little things he will be open and receptive to his higher self telling him to do certain things. What some call that intuitive moment or whatever, that, you know, he'll be able to walk into that a lot easier. So every day, every decision, small, minor things, that's where he would be guided by. He or she would be guided by. And that's also that constant meditative state.
But, well, my question is, in the case of the guy with the storm shelter, to me, it's kind of like he had that feeling or that epiphany, and then he stopped and built his temple. But then what? I mean, what was the next step after building the temple? I mean, because you can build the temple and then you get stuck there in the temple, right?
Yes, you definitely can, because he could have also gotten stuck in that experience, and he could have built the church like, oh, this is it, this is what I'm supposed to do, but they're just not allowing themselves to grow, and they're getting stuck in that particular moment.
Yeah. So he has the initial impulse of life takes place. He goes, oh my goodness, I need to do this. And he does his thing. But then, see, the strength of that initial impulse was strong as it needed to be to get past all the layers of otherwise junk that had built up. So when that impulse was finished, he gradually fell back into the other layers of whatever else he had. And it became more difficult to hear the more subtle things that are continuous.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we are in any situation, we have to always recognize what it is, where it is we're making decisions from. And not necessarily to think about that too much, but like recognize when it is we're acting out of fear or anxiety or whatever. And at the very least, learn to control that fear and anxiety and make a decision free from that.
Okay, so
And that is the practice, so we can get to that place where we can hear those more subtle things all the time.
so
And there's
to
absolutely
get-
nothing that, I'm sorry.
that's all right. So to get past that sort of thing, when you had the feeling, the overwhelming feeling, whatever, is it because if you do it in a physical way, as opposed to an internal way, then you sort of get distracted by the physical?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Hold on. Let me
Not
think
necessarily,
about that.
but if you don't know how to do it internally, you'll do it physically first. So you'll physically
Okay.
separate yourself from the
Right,
thing,
okay.
right.
right?
But if
So-
you do it internally, then you also go a step beyond in terms of realizing that because it's done internally, you've made the small necessary step to being able to hear the next thing that comes.
Yes. So, and Dan, what I know you want to say, or anyway, is that the circles get smaller. Just like in martial arts. Well, martial arts comes out of yoga. Martial arts is a form of self-mastery. So yeah, first you need to do it physically. Then, well, physically didn't start physically. It started because you thought of it. Then you can do it because you thought it. Well, it didn't start because you thought it. It started because your spirit had the impulse to produce the thought. So then you do it spiritually. And
Going backwards.
To the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, you go back to the beginning.
Because ultimately,
Absolutely.
the only
Because that's
thing
it.
that's at play here is just you. You're the only person. There's absolutely nothing physical outside of you that's stopping you from doing anything or being able to receive anything, to hear that small voice, to be receptive. It's all you.
Well, yeah, I mean, just on a simpler level, I was going to say, he didn't have the experience or the training, if you want to say it. So he felt the need to interpret it.
Right.
So he fixed it at a certain impression and interpreted it.
Right.
But the feeling didn't go away. It wasn't like it happened once. He had it persisted. So whatever it was imminent. But because he fixed it, he couldn't let himself see where and what it really was until it happened. Okay? So that's what we do, and that's the difference between having the practice, so to speak, and the connection, and having the experience.
And the thing that you
The
don't
danger of having experience.
you don't get beyond building the storm shelter and just stop it there unless you recognize, as Audrey was saying, that was opportunity for you to take the next step. So the next time you have that feeling, rather than build the shelter and stop, you stop you and shut down the noise so that you don't shape it, you don't determine where it's going to be, you let it be what it is. Then, if it is necessary for you to know what the storm is going to take place, then you will know. But it takes you missing it in order for you to get it. Because of the junk. Every one of us miss it so we can get it at some point.
I believe that's happening less frequently.
It is. It
We don't
is.
have to miss it first.
We don't. You're absolutely right. And it's all because we missed it so much in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And we feed off each other.
the beauty of it is it's not a one-time option. It's not a one-time deal. It's always there.
Always been.
Yes,
So-
yes. It
so-
never expires. Like,
I think that's
you
the-
missed it. Ah.
That's it. That's it. You're done till your next life. That's right. When you come back as a frog, you'll get it right there.
But in this world,
No.
but not of this world, that's what it is. It's
That's right. Is that why I thought frogs?
it's in this world. That's what is happening. And in this world of distraction and confusion, if you are in it and of it, you never see it. It's almost like stepping outside of the situation and looking at it so you can see what's going on. Every single time that I have written stuff that, I sit out, I can see myself writing it. And at one point in my life, I could sit down and write whenever I wanted to. But now, I can't. I can't write anything, just desire to write. And I'm not just talking about spiritual stuff. I can't write anything like I used to. But when I feel it, it just flows. And I think that it's because my desire is, or my intent with this life that's been given to me is for it to be guided by light every single moment. That's my desire. Even though it may not happen every single moment, that's what my desire is. And I believe that's the major reason that it's so difficult for me, or non-existent, for me just to sit down and write. I can't do
Here's my question.
It's kind of like a dream.
Since everything that we do in the physical reverberates in the spiritual, if that fellow, and I know it was a movie, but it's
Well, it's based on a
symbolic.
real
Yeah.
story, supposedly.
If that fellow had then taken the opportunity to reinforce, if you will, that secret place internally, to realize it and understand it, then to what extent would it have impacted the physical storm?
I gotta. I was
You
gonna.
see what I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That
So-
was his opportunity, and he didn't know it. He didn't know enough to know that.
But suppose that by virtue of him building a shelter, he diverted the storm from his place.
Which was a physical, because he acted on
Like,
being
sure,
connected to that truth.
Yeah.
However, I'm talking about an even bigger one, that had he done it internally,
Yeah.
it could have averted the storm not only from his
But
place,
there you go.
He just didn't know he was a butterfly and didn't flap
from New
his wings.
Jersey,
I mean,
or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that there are,
Well, Nick knows.
you know, there are so many different avenues, just like Sheldon was talking about, how you affect people not knowing it. And I think that's what we constantly do. That's why it's impossible for us as humans to know of the different roads that our actions take or our thoughts. Even if we do it internally, it has an effect on events that we would probably never know about. So I don't
But
discount
we have to believe that
we
it
have to believe
does.
that,
That's
yes.
all we have
Oh,
to do.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely.
And yet, you can't worry about,
No.
you can't worry about it because you can't write out on a piece of paper all those possibilities, permutations, and synapse type things. You'll go crazy, so you just gotta
Wait.
go with it.
Yeah, sometimes you get information, you don't get all of it, you have to wait, and it's
You're right.
really hard.
Yeah. And
You
see,
know
that's-
something is about
and
to
I do
happen, and you're
believe-
like, oh, I have to sit still until I know what to do.
That's why I believe that the people who we are dealing with, who are not accustomed to waiting, they're accustomed to finding the answers through research or calling somebody. Now, all of a sudden, these people who have felt like that they were in control or that they were strong enough intellectually to do what they needed to do are finding themselves waiting.
What are you talking about?
The people on Cybertruck.
I thought that's what you were talking about, but I wasn't sure.
All of a sudden,
Call people out, it's
But,
alright.
but you know, yeah, I mean, most of us have been like that, if not now. Just feeling like we can find the answer.
But
Do whatever.
I know for myself that I would hope you could characterize that ability, letting that come out of yourself as that's what a maturing and a wisdom growing thing is. Because yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking, no, we have to solve this problem. We have to solve this problem. Let's get it done. You stay up all night and you rack your brain, and sometimes you get so tired you find the solution. Other times you just you learn slowly to go, no, just go to bed and get a good night's sleep, and in the morning it'll be sitting there ready for you to see it.
Yeah, but the problem with that, in the morning now, it doesn't be there.
What?
It doesn't show up in the morning now.
Oh.
Yeah, it may be 3 weeks later, you drive down the road,
The
they hit
reason
you.
not showing up is because you.
Well,
wanted
what
to
usually
show up
happens-
and
Well, me, I don't care.
What
What
usually
I-
happens in life, though, is you don't get to wait the 3 weeks. Something demands you make a decision, so you make an incomplete, imperfect decision, if you know what I mean. And that's how we roll.
I see,
So
but
we're
I'm not,
bumping off these things all the time.
I'm not talking about decision making in terms of the natural. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about having to make a decision about who's going to get a job or where they need to be sent. But that's not the question. I'm talking about those spiritual things that we feel like we ought to have answers to. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the vision I talked about the other week. I did not get a meaning of that vision until I wasn't thinking about it. And then it came at a time when I was talking about something else. So, you know, it doesn't, that's what that's what I'm talking about anyway. Is that not what we're talking about? The spiritual?
No, let me bridge the gap between
Okay.
what that I see anyway. So
And the young shall lead.
the spiritual things that we deal with are related to our overall purpose in terms of how mankind is evolving and also how we are evolving as in our awareness of who and what we are, versus the sort of normal stuff where you get a job, what are you going to do today, that kind of stuff. It's related, but it's on a smaller scale, and so at least initially, the impulse of light or the feeling that we're looking for to sort of guide us is not as strong because we are left more so to our own devices to act on whatever capacity for action we have, to make our own choices. Now, those two come together, those two aspects of the life that we are in, when you grow in an awareness of who and what you are such that you know that every single thing you do must be about evolving mankind, which is what you are. So those two things are, when those two come together, every step you take is with purpose for creating something, for changing the environment that you find yourself in to bring it into a state of balance. And the reason we don't have what we want in terms of whatever we think of as guidance or influence when we make quote unquote mundane decisions is because we are still at the place where we're figuring out how to act within our capacity. And does that make sense though?
We're still
So
trying
there's
to act within our
something-
own capacity.
There's something about connecting those two that hasn't yet happened and doesn't happen until mastery takes place.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I get
but
that.
there was a book, I heard about it like a long time ago. I think one of my professors in college mentioned it. But it's called like After Enlightenment, the Laundry or something. So, okay, you had this epiphany or whatever, now what?
You still wash your clothes.
The truth is, you just go about your day. Because the epiphany you had was that impulse of light that gave you a glimpse of the true concern of what this reality is. But while you're not in that epiphany, you're working out the stuff that you have the capacity to work out on your own.
Yep.
And during that time, remain open to more epiphanies as they come more frequently, and as they have maybe less of an impact, because the more frequently they happen, the more used to it you'll get. But yeah, so during the downslope, all we have to do is not worry about keeping distractions out of our vision. And not physical vision, but our perception, or our ability to perceive stuff. And that's the ability to feel feelings, the ability to recognize something in terms of understanding, all that.
I can't help but think that a person or a situation or whatever it is only a distraction if it's handled improperly. Because surely whatever it is that has the potential to distract you has come into your life for a purpose.
Yeah,
Well,
you make it.
and I agree, but not exactly where you think the distraction is. The distraction is in you, in your own knee-jerk reaction to whatever that external thing is.
Right. You get stuck instead of kind of,
Well, we stick ourselves. That thing that has presented itself to you.
Well, you create the distraction.
And yeah, whatever it is, may just be aware that it may have just popped up to remind you of the fact that you still get anxious in certain situations or whatever.
Yeah.
In which case, that is the distraction.
Get out of my business, Nick.
So okay, well, here's some of my business. I probably get, and for my whole life, I probably get more anxious doing mundane things than anybody else I'm aware of. Well, most people that I'm aware of. It used to be where if I was sitting down at a table looking somebody in the eyeball, I'd be like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. That's crazy. And I used to be, well, I kind of still do. I'm like, why do I have to deal with this? I don't even understand exactly where it comes from. But,
Because you're rooted more firmly in the other world than you are in this one.
you know, I like to think that it doesn't change what I have to do.
Hey, but she's trying to help you,
That's
Nick.
true.
I don't know where you.
And breathe and talk normally and be in that situation that makes me very uncomfortable so that I can become what I need to be by going through that. Well, and not just by going through it, by getting rid of that.
Yeah.
But you can't get rid of it except by being in it.
Well, maybe we all have a little bit of that Peter Pan principle. I mean, you know, I won't grow up. I don't want to go to school. Da, 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 da. I mean, but
Well,
like it or not,
I agree with you. I don't think we grow up. The hardest thing is to grow up because you just get older. Baby is selfish. Me. Right?
Yeah.
When we get older, it's me. It's just me, myself, and I.
He's more
So-
articulate. This is.
Yes, that's what more, you know.
when you get older now, there's three years.
You get
Me,
older.
myself, and I.
Yeah, but you get older, but you don't, you know. Because I truly believe that maturity, you never mature as a human.
Yeah.
You never mature as a human. Because that was not what you were meant to be. And the reason I say you don't mature as a human is because all those little things you did as a child, you're just more sophisticated at doing them now. But you began to mature in terms of being able to articulate who you were created to be. That matures. But the human nature doesn't. And that's why you have wars. If a baby could have a war, he'd have one, you fight the other babies in the other world. But when you get older, you just got toys, so you can do that now.
That's true.
I
It
want
probably
some
would
oils.
blow you off the face of the earth.
I mean,
Give me
that's,
my
I
stuff.
want your oil.
yeah, well, that's how we are.
Well, I guess I would counter that a little bit by saying certainly what we come to think, or we read, or we're told, is that your concept of self, as you mature, and that's what you don't have to do as you get older, is mature, so to speak. You don't have to have any wisdom. You can be as ignorant as you were the day you were, well, you can't say the day you were born, because I think you're pretty wise when you're born.
Yeah.
But the concept of self, quote unquote, broadens, deepens, changes. Right? And we're in the throes right now, politically, culturally, of the most immature concept of self. We've reverted back. There's a certain percent of the population, politically anyway, that wants to go back to me, and doesn't realize that even the terminology, me, we, me, you can say that fast enough so you don't know which is which. And there's a truth in that little game, maybe. But that concept changes, and the experiences you have in life are supposed to help you see that. And I think that's one of your purposes.
Suppose for a moment that
No?
the reverting that you were talking about earlier, we're going backwards, going to beginning. Suppose the reason we see the increase in overt racism, the increase in greed, is because this dark world, this darkness, this chaos has to go back to its beginning as we go back to spiritual beginning in order for it to be cleared up, purified, lightened, or whatever. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah,
you're talking
and,
about
well, let me
reborn.
respond to both of you. So the darkness is becoming like, it's almost like it's becoming reconcentrated in the people that it originally came from.
Right.
And also with our understanding of self, that's why racism is one of the, if not the thing that has to be dealt with in order for this to be complete. Because it's based on a completely, it's not based in the reality of what self is at all. It's based on what you see. So once it gets dealt with in terms of how we collectively approach other people, we will see into things rather than see the surface level of things. And do that as our first reaction or response to a situation or a person or whatever, rather than having to go through all this process, which we're going through now, to be able to do that on like a cultural, societal, interpersonal level.
And I think maybe an example of that from the material world is like when I back again to my little Native American reading. The guy who wrote the book says that when they put him in the missionary schools, he refused to be an apple. Red on the outside and white on the inside. So when you talk about we look deeper, that's one of the material things that exist. You look like a Native American, you look like an African, but you have thrown all your culture away, your language, etc., and now you are a reflection of the oppressor, because that's what comes out of you. That's what's in you. So if you take that and apply it spiritually, then you begin to see the nature is not what you see externally. The nature is what comes out of the person in terms of how you interact with each other. And that in itself begins to eradicate this whole concept of racism, because again, it's very difficult when you begin to have biracial relationships. It's very difficult to express racism towards your grandchild, or or your niece. It's a different ball game when it comes to that.
Sorry, I'm just trying to think what fruits you'd use for other races, but sorry.
Oh, well, we know Oreo already.
Oreo.
Well, I got the
Yeah.
Chinese,
Yeah.
that means the Chinese are bananas, but what's that leave Hispanic?
I like that.
Coconut.
Sorry, I don't know.
Coconut.
Coconut, all right, you can be a coconut, there you go.
Coconut, there you go.
So this is code word now.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. When I talk about side of the truck, that's like stuff that we have to deal with. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh my God. Be careful with coconut. That can be really derogatory.
Really?
Okay.
Well,
That's
I gotta
okay.
find out about that. Why? No?
Start talking to somebody.
No, now we all
Be
want to know.
comfortable in your silence.
No, I think everybody wants to know what you meant by it.
Oh, from what I understand, in certain West Indian cultures, that's a derogatory term for someone who's crazy and behaving in a somewhat niggerish fashion. Sheldon, am I right?
In which
I'm not sure.
You're not familiar with coconut?
You're not West Indian? Okay.
No,
You're saying you're not telling, or you don't know what I'm talking about?
no, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I can find out. But
In
I
about 2
haven't tried
seconds.
this coconut.
Okay. The-
Next time you see your Jamaican friend, call him a coconut.
Do not do that.
You'll find out real quickly. Yeah?
then you be like, is Sheldon on? No.
Sheldon, right in your face.
No, that was
What's up?
The only thing I will verify is derogative. I don't know why in a minute. I just know. Yeah, don't say that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, people probably don't want to be thought of as bananas either, but still.
Oh, it's definitely worse than bananas.
Okay. Moving on.
Right.
So,
It's important to know, though.
so what we're actually doing with externally it's what we call racism or prejudice, or allowing fear of what you don't understand to direct your actions. What we're doing is we're either healing it or we're kicking it out of the earth. One of those two. The energy or the tendency to reject the creator and reject the natural order, and I mean that in the original sense of the natural order. I'll explain that in a second, but we're rejecting the natural order and replacing it with what our intellect and what our ego wants to create in terms of the way the world works or the way we relate to other people, which produces prejudice, fear, racism, all that stuff. So just like I mentioned before, it seems like the darkness is concentrating and becoming much more resistive. And that's because it senses its own
Demise.
Yeah.
demise
Yeah.
or transformation.
Well, demise can be transformation.
Right.
It senses the end of the way that I am now, as
Right.
I am now from my perspective, from my perception and my perspective.
And just as strongly as we would react to death that we saw coming, we'd be like, I don't want that.
Okay, but we're saying racism then, I mean, help me think of a why. Because then what you're saying, are you not, is the real function, so to speak, of man being in this world is not to understand this world, it's to use the experience to understand himself.
Yes.
Himself in what would I say, capital M, mankind.
Yes.
And this is the last, deepest blockage there is
That's
to
it.
knowing
Absolutely.
who I am, who you are, who I am. It's all
Yes.
part of the
Yes.
same.
Yes.
Right. So I mean, if you were talking to somebody just normally, why? They'd say, no, there are other problems. You go, no, this is it because. Boom.
Well,
Okay.
it's because it's the end of taking 2 steps forward, 3 steps back,
Okay.
or whatever. It's the thing that it's the final. All right, I'll let go and go with the flow, as opposed to keep trying to put the barriers of ego in the way.
See,
In terms of what gets the ball rolling on a global level.
and because racism, everything that builds walls, everything that feeds ego can be found in racism. Whether it's economic, whether it doesn't matter what it is, religion, it does not matter what it is. Therefore, racism is definitely the last wall at Jericho that has to come down. I believe that once we deal with racism, we've dealt with everything. Because what is it that you can think of that racism does not address? People are in the inner city, and the stores are moved away from them. That's racism. The idea of Nagasaki and Hiroshima versus Germany, that's racism. So what is it that does not reflect racism? The whole idea of a nuclear weapon. It's okay for Caucasians to have one. But when India got one, oh my God, it like went crazy to make sure that no other people of color get one. I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying that regardless of how you look at the picture, or from what perspective you look at it, racism is involved in it. So it is imperative to face it, to deal with it, and because when you were talking about earlier the demise, the darkness that's most resistant is racism. That's the most resistive darkness that we face, racism.
But I mean, I was after a straightforward, if I was talking to somebody, I'd say if our real purpose, or the opportunity we have of this life, this garden that we've been given to live in, is to know who we are and what we are. And I want to put the spiritual language in that to make somebody understand that it is the ultimate, which is why it's ultimately blasphemous, ultimate block to the sense of who we are as man, which is why we're here, to learn what we can, so that, you know what I'm trying to, so in effect, so you're denying the opportunity to have the fullness of the spiritual connection you can find in this. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I-
So I
exactly.
could tie it to that in a nice straightforward 3 sentences.
But it's not for us to learn who we are as man, but it's for us to learn who we are as Elohim. Because we, as man, look at who we are.
See,
Well,
I was
I wanna-
thinking when you were saying that is, the bottom line is you are me and I'm you. So what I do to you, I do to me.
But no
Because
one
we-
listens,
when
no
you-
one listens to
you're
that anymore. No one listens to that anymore.
Well, then
Yeah,
when you dress it up and they don't understand how you dress it up,
No, but you're
still
taking
doesn't
it-
mean the same.
But all I mean to do is take that phrase apart. People need to be reminded of what the steps, the components are. You know what I'm trying to say?
No,
Well,
They
let me-
don't understand
I
it.
don't.
They're
I
not
really don't.
understanding it.
Okay, this is what okay.
They're not gonna understand the new version.
Nick,
Let me attempt to do that.
Okay.
When you refuse to accept someone else as human based on what you see, what you have defined as human in your relative state of ignorance in reality, you are refusing to accept who and what you are. Because the truth is, the reality of what you are, those two people, is the same thing. So you are refusing to accept yourself because you are afraid of it.
but until I know myself, I'm not gonna receive what you just said.
And
Until I can know myself, how can I?
But see, that's why
accept
I wanted to then take it up a level and say, to know and accept yourself is to know what the Creator intended you to. You know what I'm trying to take it to that
When you-
level so people can't just dismiss it.
I don't
Because
think.
I'm talking about evangelicals, whoever, who can be very racist, you know?
It doesn't matter.
I don't
You're
think-
coming from a logical
Yeah, but
perspective.
I'm
I
using
don't-
their own stuff.
I do not think that we can, that you can, give a simple answer to it, because the question, when someone asks the question, the answer comes. Right now, if we, the struggle is to put it in intellectual terms. That's not gonna happen. We can recognize what it is, but we don't know what the answer would be until the question is raised.
And it may not be a physical answer to the
Right.
question. It may be an action
Actions.
that shows. It may be a different method of communicating that speaks to that person more so than words, which are defining and confining. I don't know.
Nikki has.
Okay,
Just, it's from, I guess, from a physical standpoint, an over-the-top concept that made sense to me was I read in a work that man entered the earth as a physical being, as one being, but all 5 beings at the same time: red, black, white, brown, orange.
Whatever.
But each was set up so that each one could conquer a certain part of the 3rd dimension, or this physical world, to come back to that oneness that they were at before. So without accepting that race and what they were supposed to bring to the table, you're in itself not accepting yourself as a whole, because you need all 5 to get back to that oneness that you need to be, in a sense. I don't know how to give that to someone. I just know it works for me, that I have to accept every part of myself. because the whole point in coming in here and dividing at that point in time had a good purpose in it. The division of the races as we entered the physical from the spirit had a purpose to get us back to that oneness that we left in the first place.
What you're describing is the races becoming the atom, becoming all five.
Right, exactly, exactly.
And when it comes back together, that's when it would be the image of Elohim. Because Adam is not the image of Elohim.
Right,
It was created to be that,
exactly.
but it had to become that from the substance that it was given.
But you're also talking about light frequencies. Colors break out based
Yeah.
on their frequency, how they vibrate and resonate.
Yes.
So, yeah, they all have to come back together to be one.
Well, and what, black absorbs all colors,
Yeah.
and white repels them. So all of them have to come back together. How does black absorb? The reason something is black because it absorbs all the colors.
Reflects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, think about that. So African and black people were the first because they had to absorb, in order to get light from one place to another place, it has to be emitted and absorbed. So the only way it could be absorbed if it had something to absorb it. So this is partially metaphorical, but also physically literal. Which means
We had
the last people.
We had to be enslaved so we can carry light.
Let me just leave it at that, actually. The initial absorbers of the light had to be black because black is the only color that absorbs light, or absorbs the most. So out of the darkness, quote unquote, everything came because it contained everything. And I know that's a line, I forget whose creation myth that is.
But that's
At the Hopi,
that's also
five creation,
the Christian created myth and the Jewish they don't know it.
five races.
Because
Yeah.
in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, and the darkness covered the deep, and out of that darkness, that's when creation began.
Yeah, but because like you can say, absorbing light isn't receiving it to share it. I mean, there's a lot of ways that this thing gets wacky. Now you're a black hole. What good's a black hole to the universe, right? Why wouldn't you want to be something that reflects, bounces, blah, 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 particularly if it brings warmth? I mean, all the metaphors you can think of, so.
Well,
It's
that's
a pretty
what
trick
both,
one.
that's what both and every other range of the spectrum is here to master. Like you can't. So in the beginning, people operated on an awareness that they were a part of the creator and had all this knowledge simply because it was closer to the time of the beginning. But the mastery comes in when you absorb light, but also then consciously choose to put it back out again. And at the other end of the spectrum, at the white end of the spectrum, you don't absorb light, but you reflect it. The mastery comes in when you begin to consciously learn how to take in that light and absorb it. Does that make sense? So everybody's learning the same thing from a different perspective,
Makes sense.
but the goal is the same.
So if you're an apple or everything else, so the big fight's between black and white. Everybody else is just a bystander.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
And yeah, that's just because those
I mean,
two.
that's the ultimate fight, so to
Yes,
speak.
it is.
Everybody else is
They're
just casualties. They're just casualties.
Yeah.
Right?
Or not, or not.
Not casualties.
No, but I mean,
Well,
But that's
You know what I'm
reality.
I have
I'm
a
be careful. I'm just trying to say it.
just a question, because when I get, I mean, and it's just because, again, the idea of the struggle between the black and the white, okay? If and this is where I really try to go, I'm visualizing myself as a soul being that, again, only in this physical world do I choose black, white, this, that, and the other. And a lot of times I'm choosing that because there may be an issue within myself with that other that's causing me not to elevate to the level I need to be spiritually. So in that sense, I mean, I feel like I've walked in all of them. I honestly feel like I've been black, white, this, that, and the other, and that reflects in my ability to be able to understand and actually entertain and mix very well with multiple. So how do I say, like when Nick said black came first because it needed to absorb, versus saying that no, we all entered at the same time, each had its own purpose, but for selfish reasons, for some reason, white began to hold on for self. But what if that concept of, like, to me, the concept of slavery, and while blacks struggle a lot now, could be that energy that enslaved had to become enslaved to that, even in a different time, and rather be poverty. It may not be slavery now, but it's poverty. But that soul that once enslaved could then be that soul that's a slave to some other form of slavery, in a sense. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, it is a form. The slavery that exists now is the desire to be wealthy, to be rich. What money is what enslaves now. The people, if you ask someone, what do you struggle with? List 5 problems that you have or 5 struggles that you face. And I guarantee you 5 of them will relate to money.
Yeah.
So that's the new slave master. But the other part of that is this. Not only is the dark-skinned person enslaved by money, but also the white person is enslaved by money. Absolutely, because that's the God. So that has to be dealt with in terms of recognizing it for what it really is. And then things began to, then people began to see from a different perspective each other. But right now we see rich and poor.
Right.
See, the reality is this. There's no such thing as a middle class. That's been a hoax the whole time. The reason it's called the middle class is because if you're poor and you're rich, there's nothing in between. So I can never get there. But middle class is supposed to be one step from that. Step out of poverty and a step into the wealthy. Everybody's poor, except those who control the God of this world. The greenbacks, the gold. Mm-hmm. So frog skin. So that in itself is slavery. You see what I'm talking about?
All right. And I do agree, because I've always said that tax cuts are really the entitlements of the wealthy. Everybody always say we got to get rid of the entitlements. Well, the wealthy get a lot of entitlements.
And I'm glad they do. I really am. I'm glad they get entitlements. I'm elated that the amount of wealth that they have is increasing. It really, really, really is the best thing that can happen. I want them to get even more. Because the more that happens, the more people become aware or have a desire to become aware of really what's going on and who they are. If you don't have your back against the wall, you don't have a reason to search for more. You didn't look for God because you were good.
Right.
You didn't wake up one morning and say, my breath smells like pet milk. I need God in my life. It might smell like alcohol and say, oh my God, I won't do that no more. Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it takes pressure. It takes resistance. And that's what creates the resistance. It's like, if, and I think I've said this before, and if I have, just pretend I haven't. It's like I was talking to a friend of mine when we were in D.C. after Obama got elected the first time, and my statement was, Obama needs to send Bush a thank you note. And he asked me, are you crazy? But if it had not been for Bush and the economy, he wouldn't have got elected. Things were really, really bad. And that in itself helped get him elected. So we need a change. Something got to change. That kind of thing. Now believe me, I do not think that was a natural occurrence by any means whatsoever. I do believe it was spiritual. And I do believe that it had to be someone from the extremes, the dark and the light. I do believe that it could not have been, when I say one, I'm talking about African American, it had to be from the extremes in order for that to take place.
Because you got color, you got culture, you got religion, you got lots of things wrapped up in
Wrapped up in that.
that.
Yeah.
You got economics.
Dad was an economist anyway. Come to think of it, most Kenyans that I went to college with were majoring in economics.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So, where are we at?
Next
Done.
week. We're at next week. Okay.
Good. I feel something.
You feel the love.
It feels good.
What you feel?
I don't know. Good. I'm done.
Okay.
We, the light of truth and the truth of the light, have strength, courage, and conviction to know and understand that we are one. Amen.